What happens when a late-night icon faces off against royalty gone rogue in an interview that spirals completely out of control? It only took 38 seconds after one shocking comment for Prince Harry to be escorted off the set of The Late Show, leaving Stephen Colbert standing victorious and the audience in absolute disbelief. The studio lights were hot that evening. Stephen Colbert sat behind his desk, his signature smile, ready for another night of entertaining America. Prince Harry walked onto the stage to thunderous applause, waving to the crowd like he owned the place. He settled into the guest chair with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, crossing his legs and leaning back like he was about to grant Colbert the privilege of his presence. "Welcome to the show," Colbert said warmly, extending his hand for a shake. Harry took it, but his grip was limp, almost dismissive. The audience didn't notice. They were still cheering. But Colbert noticed. He's a professional. He's been doing this for years. He knows when something feels off. "Thanks for having me," Harry said, his accent thick and his tone just a bit too casual. "Though I must say, I've been on better sets." The audience laughed nervously. Was it a joke? Colbert kept his smile plastered on. "Well, we do our best here in New York," he replied smoothly. "Not quite Buckingham Palace, but we try." "Clearly," Harry muttered, just loud enough for the microphones to catch. Colbert's eyebrows raised slightly, but he pressed on. He's a pro. He wasn't going to let one snide comment derail the interview. "So, let's talk about your new book," Colbert began, holding up a copy. "You've been very open about your life, your struggles, your family. What made you want to share all of this with the world?" Harry shifted in his seat. "Well, Stephen, some of us actually have interesting lives worth sharing. Not everyone can just sit behind a desk and read jokes off a teleprompter." The audience went quiet. Dead quiet. You could hear the camera operators breathing. Colbert's smile tightened, but he didn't drop it. "That's certainly one way to describe what I do," he said evenly. "Though I like to think there's a bit more to it than that." "Do you?" Harry shot back. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks pretty simple. You make fun of people, you laugh at your own jokes, and you collect a paycheck. I've actually lived through real hardship." Colbert leaned forward slightly. "I'm sure you have," he said carefully. "And I think a lot of people admire your willingness to be vulnerable. But this is also a comedy show, so maybe we can keep things a bit lighter." "Lighter?" Harry scoffed. "Of course you'd want that. You Americans always want everything to be light and fluffy. No depth, no real conversation, just superficial nonsense." The audience was getting uncomfortable. People were shifting in their seats. Some were looking at each other with wide eyes. This wasn't the fun celebrity interview they'd signed up for. This was becoming something else entirely. Something ugly. Colbert took a breath. "You know, I've interviewed a lot of guests over the years," he said, his voice still measured, but firmer now. "Presidents, actors, musicians, authors. And I've always tried to give everyone a fair chance to share their story. But there's a difference between being honest and being disrespectful." "Oh, here we go," Harry said, rolling his eyes. "The American lecture about respect. This is rich coming from someone who makes a living mocking people every single night." "I mock people in power," Colbert corrected. "Politicians who make decisions that affect millions. That's satire. That's my job. What you're doing right now is just being rude to someone who invited you onto their show." Harry stood up suddenly, his face flushed. "Your show? Your show? Do you have any idea who I am? I'm a prince. I was born into one of the most famous families in the world. You're just a talk show host. You should be grateful I even agreed to come here." The audience gasped. Actually gasped. Colbert stood up too, his smile finally gone. "I am grateful when guests come here to have a real conversation," he said, his voice steady and strong. but I'm not going to sit here and be talked down to by someone who clearly thinks he's better than everyone else in this room. I am better than everyone in this room, Harry snapped. I've met world leaders. I've represented my country on the global stage. What have you done? Tell jokes? Make people laugh? That's not real work. Colbert's jaw clenched. You know what? I think we're done here. Excuse me? Harry said, his eyes narrowing. I said we're done, Colbert repeated. This interview is over. You can leave. Harry laughed, but it was a harsh, bitter sound. You can't kick me off. Do you know what kind of publicity nightmare that would be for you? I'm Prince Harry. People love me. Not right now, they don't, Colbert said, gesturing to the audience. Several people were actually shaking their heads. A few were filming on their phones. And yes, I can absolutely ask you to leave. This is my show. This is my studio. And you've been nothing but insulting since you sat down. Insulting? Harry's voice rose. I've been honest. That's what you people claim to want, right? Honesty? Well, here it is. Your show is mediocre at best. You're not as clever as you think you are. And frankly, I have better things to do than waste my time here. Colbert pointed toward the exit. Then go do them. Please. Leave. Harry's face turned red. You're making a huge mistake, he said, his voice shaking with anger. Do you have any idea how bad this is going to make you look? Probably not as bad as it's going to make you look, Colbert replied calmly. You came on this show and insulted me. Insulted my crew, insulted my audience, and insulted America. All because what? You think being born into royalty makes you special? It doesn't. Not here. Not in this country. We don't bow to kings and princes. We believe people earn respect through their actions, not their bloodline. The audience erupted into applause. Actual applause. They were clapping for Colbert, supporting him, backing him up against this entitled guest who thought he could walk all over everyone. Harry looked around, shocked. He clearly expected people to side with him. He expected his fame and his title to protect him. But it wasn't working. Not here. Not now. You're all delusional, Harry said, his voice dripping with contempt. Every single one of you. You worship celebrities and then act like you're so independent. You're hypocrites. And you're a guest who's overstayed his welcome, Colbert said. He gestured to someone off camera. 2 security guards appeared from the wings. They weren't aggressive. They were professional. But they were there. Gentlemen, can you please escort our guest out of the building? Harry's eyes went wide. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious, Colbert said. You wanted to leave anyway, remember? You have better things to do. So, go do them. Somewhere else. The security guards moved closer. Harry looked from them to Colbert to the audience. He was trapped. He'd backed himself into a corner with his own arrogance, and now there was no way out that didn't make him look bad. This is absurd, Harry sputtered. This is absolutely absurd. I'm a guest. You don't treat guests like this. You're right, Colbert agreed. I don't treat guests like this. But you stopped being a guest the moment you decided to insult everyone in this room. Now you're just someone who needs to leave. Harry's hands were shaking. He was furious, embarrassed, humiliated in front of hundreds of people and countless cameras. You'll regret this, he said, his voice low and threatening. I promise you, you'll regret this. I doubt it, Colbert said simply. The security guards gently took Harry by the arms. He jerked away from them at first, trying to maintain some shred of dignity. But they persisted, professional and calm. Sir, please come with us, one of them said quietly. Harry looked at Colbert one more time. His face was a mask of rage and wounded pride. You're nothing, he hissed. You hear me? Nothing. Colbert didn't flinch. And yet I'm the one still standing on my own stage while you're being escorted out. Funny how that works. The audience cheered again, louder this time. They were completely on Colbert's side now. Whatever sympathy they might have had for Harry at the start of the interview was gone. He'd shown his true colors, and they were ugly. The security guards led Harry toward the exit. He was still sputtering, still trying to argue. "This is outrageous. I've never been treated like this. Do you know who my family is? Do you know what connections I have?" But nobody was listening anymore. The cameras had already cut away from him. Colbert was back at his desk, straightening his papers, composing himself. The band started playing music to fill the awkward silence. "Well," Colbert said into the camera, his signature smile returning. "That was something. Folks, I apologize that you had to see that. We had a great interview planned, some funny bits, some interesting conversation, but sometimes things don't go the way you expect." The audience clapped supportively. They were with him, completely with him. "I want to be clear about something," Colbert continued, his voice serious now. "I have nothing against Prince Harry personally. Or I didn't anyway. I invited him here because I thought we could have a good conversation. I've interviewed royalty before. I've interviewed controversial figures. I've interviewed people I disagree with politically, personally, professionally. And it's always been respectful. Because that's what we do here. We treat people with dignity." He paused, letting that sink in. "But respect goes both ways," he said. "And when someone comes onto this stage and decides they're going to be rude to me, rude to my crew, rude to you, the audience, well, there are consequences for that. I don't care if you're a prince or a president or a plumber. You don't get to talk down to people just because you think you're special." The applause was deafening now. People were standing. They were cheering. They were whistling. Colbert had become the hero of this story, the everyman standing up to entitled royalty. "So yeah, I kicked him off," Colbert said with a shrug, "and I'd do it again, because this show, this studio, this space, it's built on mutual respect, and the moment that's gone, well, the interview's over." Behind the scenes, Harry was still arguing with security. His voice could faintly be heard through the studio walls. "This is unacceptable. I demand to speak to someone in charge. I demand an apology." But no apology was coming. Not from Colbert. Not from the network. Not from anyone. Because Harry had crossed a line, and everyone knew it. Back on stage, Colbert was wrapping up. "We're going to take a quick commercial break," he said to the camera. "When we come back, we'll have our next guest, who I'm confident will be much more pleasant. Stay with us." The cameras cut, and the studio erupted in chatter. Audience members were talking excitedly to each other, pulling out their phones, texting their friends. The crew was buzzing. Everyone was stunned by what had just happened. Colbert stood up and walked to the edge of the stage. "Everyone okay?" he asked his audience. They cheered in response. "Good. Sorry about that, folks. That was, not how I expected tonight to go." Someone from the audience shouted, "You did the right thing," and others joined in agreement. Colbert smiled, a real smile this time, not his TV smile. "Thanks. I appreciate that. It's not easy to kick someone off in the middle of an interview, but sometimes you just have to stand up for yourself and for what's right." In the hallway outside the studio, Harry was finally being led toward the exit. He'd stopped arguing, but his face was still flushed with anger. The security guards were patient, professional, not engaging with his complaints. "I'll never come back to this country," Harry muttered as they reached the door. "Never." One of the security guards held the door open. "Have a good evening, sir," he said politely. Harry glared at him and walked out into the night. Back inside, the show was getting ready to resume. Colbert was back in his chair, his makeup team touching up his face. The band was ready. The next guest was waiting in the wings, probably a bit nervous after what they'd just witnessed. 30 seconds, the stage manager called out. Colbert took a deep breath. He'd just done something unprecedented. He'd kicked a prince off his show on live television. It would be talked about for days, maybe weeks. There would be think pieces and hot takes and endless social media debates. But he didn't regret it. Not for a second. 10 seconds, the stage manager said. Colbert straightened his tie and put on his TV smile. The smile that millions of Americans trusted. The smile that said everything was going to be okay. 5, 4, 3. The cameras came back on. The show went on. Because that's what professionals do. They keep going, no matter what chaos just happened. They stand their ground. They do their job, and they don't let anyone make them feel small. Welcome back, Colbert said smoothly, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just made television history. Our next guest is an Oscar-winning actress who stars in the new thriller opening this weekend. Please welcome the wonderful Emma Stone. Emma walked out, smiling but clearly aware of the tension still lingering in the air. She sat down carefully, almost like she was afraid the chair might explode. So, Colbert said with a grin, promise me you're going to be nicer than my last guest? Emma laughed, and the audience laughed with her. The ice was broken. The show could continue. I promise, she said. I'm just happy to be here, and I promise not to insult you, your crew, your audience, or your entire country. Well, you're already doing better than Prince Harry, Colbert joked, and the audience roared with laughter. The interview with Emma went smoothly. She was charming, funny, self-deprecating. She told stories about filming her new movie, about working with her co-stars, about the challenges of doing her own stunts. It was everything a good talk show interview should be, but everyone in that studio knew what they'd really come for, what they'd really witnessed. History, drama, a moment when someone stood up to entitlement and won. When the show finally wrapped for the night, Colbert sat at his desk for a moment alone. The audience had filed out. The crew was breaking down the set. The cameras were off. He thought about Harry, about the anger in his eyes, about the entitlement dripping from every word. He thought about how easy it would have been to just let it slide, to laugh it off, to finish the interview and pretend everything was fine. But he hadn't done that. He'd drawn a line. He'd said no. And that mattered. His producer walked over. That was intense, she said. Yeah, Colbert agreed. It was. The phones are ringing off the hook, she continued. Social media is exploding. Everyone's talking about it. Good or bad? Colbert asked. Mostly good, she said. People are saying you did the right thing, that someone needed to stand up to him, that he's been getting away with acting entitled for too long. Colbert nodded. Good. Because I meant what I said. Respect goes both ways. I don't care who you are. His producer smiled. You know this is going to follow you for a while, right? Every interview you do, people are going to ask about it. Let them ask, Colbert said, standing up. I've got nothing to hide. I treated him with respect until he made it impossible to continue. That's the story. That's the truth. He walked off the stage, leaving behind the desk, the cameras, the lights. But the moment stayed. It would live on in clips and commentary, in debates and discussions. Because sometimes the most important thing you can do is stand your ground. Even when it's hard. Even when it's uncomfortable. Even when the person you're standing up to is a prince. Especially when the person you're standing up to is a prince. Because in America, nobody is royalty. Nobody is above accountability. And nobody gets to treat others like they're beneath them. That was the real lesson of that night. Not that Stephen Colbert kicked Prince Harry off his show, but that he had to. That Harry's behavior left him no choice. And in doing so, Colbert reminded everyone watching what real leadership looks like, what real dignity looks like, what it means to stand up for yourself and for others, even when it costs you something. The studio was dark now, empty, silent. But the echo of that confrontation would ring out for a long time to come. Somewhere in the city, Harry was probably still fuming. still convinced he'd been wronged, still unable to see that he'd brought this on himself. But that wasn't Colbert's problem anymore. He'd done his job. He'd stood his ground. He'd shown millions of viewers that respect matters, that kindness matters, and that nobody, no matter their title or their fame, gets to treat others poorly without consequences. And that, more than any joke or any interview or any viral moment, was what The Late Show was really about. Using humor and honesty to shine a light on what really matters. Standing up for what's right, even when it's easier to look away. The cameras were off. The lights were down. The show was over. But the message remained, clear as day, ringing out into the night and beyond. A reminder that, in the end, how we treat each other is all that really matters.